Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. A year ago at this time, we were reeling from the unexpected and devastating attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the hijacked airplane that went down in Pennsylvania, the most devastating attacks in the nation's history. We knew that day that this nation was under attack and that it would change us somehow. A year later, we are still coming to grips with what happened to us that day. So this afternoon here in Studio 8H in New York at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, we have gathered family members who continue to mourn their losses. We have warriors who have been on the front lines. We have political figures from both parties, and we'll get an update on the latest state of alert from Tom Ridge, the President's advisor on Homeland Security. But most of all, we want this to be a family meeting more than a town meeting, representing the family of America, what we've been through, what we can learn from each other, the questions that we still have. And there are so many that are outstanding. Let's begin in our audience now with John Vigiano, who spent so much of his time at Ground Zero. It's hard to imagine you lost a son who was a firefighter and a son who was a policeman. Does this day in some way help you get through all of that?
This day is probably the second toughest day of my life. My son's like most of the young men and women that went to work that day, never expected to be the first line in a battle. They were normal kids. They grew up like all boys, played sports, got into some mischief, went on to become Eagle Scouts, and chose civil service. I imagine they wanted to follow me because I always bragged about my job. Both of those boys would have been very disappointed had they missed that fire. Both of them, I'm sure, did what they had to do. Being seasoned professionals, they knew what they were getting into.
Why was it important for you to go to Ground Zero every day, John?
If the situation was reversed, they would have been there for me. And I had to be there. 343 firefighters, I knew over 200 of them. Some of them worked with me, some of them I trained, some of them I went to their weddings, some of them I went to their children's births. So they were like my family. And then through Joe, I met a lot of his police officer buddies, especially in emergencies, a very tight group. So I knew these people, and I had to be there.
You have to live with this every day, and you will continue to live with it every day. Do you worry that the rest of the country is beginning to drift away from the real meaning of September 11th, 2001?
They sure are. It started sometime in late October, when we started going from a recovery to a construction site. The changes were subtle, but they were there. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, I was down at the site. And it was a construction site, and it bothered me. You know, we lost the fact that that's hallowed ground. That's Pearl Harbor. That's Gettysburg. That's Normandy. That's sacred ground. And to see people selling souvenirs and walking around like it's just a park, no good. The country can never forget what happened that day. Never. And the other thing they can't forget is these young men, like this young lieutenant in front of me, they're in harm's way right now. And we can't forget that. We have to support our president and support these boys.
Do you think that enough is being asked of us as individual citizens, as a nation, not just by the president, but by political leaders in both parties at the federal, state, municipal level?
I don't think they're asking enough. We should give more. We have to give. Can't ask for take. I mean, Mr. Kennedy had once said something like that. You know, don't ask what you want, what you can give. I can't paraphrase it correctly. But this is our country. We're at war. World War II, the whole world stood behind us. And the whole country stood behind our military. Now, 1 year later, and we got people talking about why are we doing this and why are we doing that. Can't question that. That's why we elect these people. They make the decisions. We support them. And I support them.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Patricia Gambino, who's over on the other side of the studio here, escaped from Tower 2.
Yes, I was on the 72nd floor in Tower 2 when One World Trade was hit with the first plane. And I was on the phone with my mother, and I felt something, and I said, something just happened. And I look up, and I see the paper flying all over, and I'm pretty high up. So I knew something had blown up. Immediately, I started making my way down the stairs. I was on the 44th floor.
You had no hesitation about going out. Some people decided...
No, I immediately jumped out of my seat and started going down. I was going to look out a window on the south side of the building, and I could hear the jets of the second plane. It was a split second, and I heard, and I was on the 44th floor when that plane hit the building, and we were shaken.
And when you got out of Tower 2, then you had other stunning news that you had to deal with.
Regarding the sites of the blood, and yeah, it was a lot of debris, and it was very scary at that point. You know, you really realized you realized the intensity when we were shaking in the building, but I just thought it was very close to the floor I was on, and but when we were outside, we realized the severity, and the frightening part was watching the firefighters passing in the stairwells, going up into the building, and when I was outside, I realized it's very scary.
Your brother's a firefighter.
Yes, he was off duty that day.
Did you think about him right away?
Yes, of course.
Did you know where he was?
No, I didn't. And when we left the buildings, people were trying to use their cell phones and were unable, and no phones were working. When I got onto the Brooklyn Bridge, my phone rang, miraculously. My older brother gotten through, and everyone started to ask me if they could use my phone, but that was the first and last call we were able to make. And he just immediately said, thank God you're okay, and Michael's on vacation. So I was under the impression that he was on vacation, still concerned, because knowing my brother, he would jog over that bridge to get there.
And he had been playing golf that day, I gather.
He had a 9:08 tee time, and the parking attendant saw him run to his car and throw his clubs in and screech out of the parking lot. And
when did you realize that your brother was, in fact, in harm's way and that he'd been lost?
Well, you know, I definitely was in total denial about him being hurt or in any way. You have to realize this is my baby brother, I called him. He's almost 5 years younger. And I just knew how strong he was, and I just would never believe that you know, that he's immortal, and in a sense where he could get hurt. And so I didn't believe it up until about 10 o'clock at night. I started to get a bad feeling because I kept calling the firehouse, and I just started to get a bad feeling. But still, I still had hope, and then we had the news at 1 o'clock in the morning.
And it turns out that your brother was part of another memorable but tragic scene, because Father Michael Judge, who is now the fire department's well-known and late and lamented chaplain, was attending to him.
Yes, they had a very good friendship. My brother was very close with him, and we had a letter at the wake from Father Judge to my brother. And he had gone into the city and drove Father Judge's station wagon with my brother's captain, Daniel Brethel, down to the location together. All three of them died at the same time.
Now, a year later, you've lost your brother. You escaped with your own life.
Yes.
What is the one big issue that worries you, the concern that you don't think has been addressed in this country?
Well, I just hope, I think that all concerns are being addressed, I mean, regarding what we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So I really, it's not really for me to say what concerns, you know, regarding intelligence or anything like that.
Patricia Gambino, thank you very much. We're going to go to Washington now. I have on the screen here Senator Tom Daschle, who is the Senate Majority Leader, obviously. Senator, right after the attacks 1 year ago, there was unprecedented political unity in Washington, at least unprecedented in modern times, probably not since World War II. That seems to have come unraveled. Do you agree?
Well, I think it's come unraveled with regard to many of the domestic fights we're having. I don't know that with regard to the war itself, with the effort in Afghanistan, Tom, or the effort underway worldwide to bring those responsible to justice, there is any division. We will pass unanimously a resolution today, as we did a year ago, and that unanimous support for these resolutions is, again, yet another indication that when it comes to this particular fight, when it comes to this challenge, this effort, there is still a good deal of unity within our country and politically as well.
A few months ago, when you raised some questions about how well the war on terrorism was going, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle were pretty critical right away, saying this is no time to be questioning the policies of the military or the president. Are you constrained from raising questions about the war on terrorism?
I don't think so. I was surprised, frankly, by that criticism, because I don't think that patriotism requires silence. I think it requires us to be persistent, and that the democratic voices, with a small d, democratic, can be heard, that the noise of democracy, especially in times of peril, is just as apparent as it is in times of peace. So I think it's very important that we ask questions, and history has shown those who have asked questions in the past generally have done this country a real service.
This is not a day for politics as usual, Senator, but we do have an election coming up. What impact do you think that the war on terrorism, what happened a year ago today, will have on these congressional elections?
Tom, I don't know that anybody can answer that question today. I think it'll all be something that probably will be a lot more apparent the weeks following the election, but today I think it's impossible to judge. I do think that the president is in a stronger position politically, obviously, than he was a year and a day ago. But I don't know what reflection that might have, what ramifications that might have for the overall election itself. I'm not sure that many people today especially are thinking about that.
Senator Tom Daschle, the Senate Majority Leader, thanks very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
We're back here in Studio 8H now, where we have a number of families, and because there were so many families and so many different locations in which people were involved, we want to introduce you now to Alison and Jefferson Crowther. Where are they? Right here in the front row. You're carrying a red bandana.
Yes, I am. I carry it every day now with me, and the red bandana was something that our son always carried in his back rear pocket, his back right pocket.
Tell us about your son and where he was working that day.
Oh, all right, I will. Wells was 24 years old. He was an equities trader for Sandler, O'Neill and Partners on the 104th floor of the second tower. So when the attack started in the first tower, he called his father in his office. He spoke with several friends. We knew he was in his office at about 9 o'clock, and then we heard nothing except a phone call that he made to me on my cell phone that I missed. We heard nothing about him. He was not recovered until March 19th. And so for those 6 months, we thought we would never hear anything. And we learned in March that he had in fact been recovered in the lobby, the ground floor lobby area at the command center that had been set up by the fire department. So he was with the firemen.
And Wells became a kind of larger-than-life heroic figure, even in death, known as the Red Bandana Man.
That's right. The man in the red bandana. And this was not something we uncovered for yet another 2 months. In May, Memorial Weekend, my husband handed me the New York Times to read this article because he could not read the articles or see the specials. yet it was too painful for him. And yet I was searching always to find him. And I read in the this documented article eyewitness reports from the sky lobby of on the 78th floor of the second tower, a mysterious man in a red bandana who suddenly appeared from nowhere and carried a woman to clear air and called for fire extinguishers and rescued. And there were several reports from eyewitnesses. So as soon as I read that, I knew I'd found him. I said, well, there you are, you know, at last. And so I followed up to find the women, and we spoke. I sent them current photographs, and they confirmed, yes, this was Wells.
Alison, I dare say, I know this has been a tremendous loss, but you seem to be at peace with the idea that your son acted heroically in the closing hours of his life.
Yes, we are very much so. We miss him dreadfully. We would give anything that this didn't happen, that he would have come back to us. But for so long we knew nothing, and we expected to hear nothing, and that was torment. Because we thought he might have been trapped and unable to do anything. He was a fully trained volunteer firefighter, so we knew he had skills to help or get himself out if he was able. And so to find out that he was able to help lives and save others, we knew he was very fulfilled in his final hour, that he'd become Wells Crowther, firefighter, and was no longer Wells Crowther, equities trader that day.
Well, maybe we can encourage more people, not just to wear a red bandana, but to act as heroically as he did.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us. Down at Ground Zero right now is the Senator from New York, Hillary Clinton, standing in a gusty wind. And Senator, before I ask you a question, we just want to share some video. It was evocative, really, as the names were beginning to be read there today. A small dust storm blew up, and it did seem to be a reminder of all that we had lost that day. Senator, I want to get back to some of the issues at hand now. The Homeland Security Bill. A lot of people are concerned, especially today, given the second highest state of alert that we're now living under, about whether we're going to get this Homeland Security Bill through the Congress before the first of the year. You have some real reservations about it.
Well, Tom, I think that we will get a Homeland Security Bill through the Congress, and I know that we're at a high state of alert. New York has been on that state of alert for quite some time, and I guess it's important to remind ourselves that we're alert, we're not alarmed. We've got a lot of people working very hard to keep us as safe as possible, and in Washington, we're having, I think, a legitimate debate about how best to provide the resources that our frontline homeland defenders, namely our police and our firefighters and others, need.
One of your principal concerns, however, is that the president wants to have control over the personnel and the budget to move people in and out of there as he would like to. You worry that, what, civil service will be compromised and the rights of the federal government unions?
Well, I don't see the need for the authority that's being requested. The president has that waiver authority. We have fought wars. We've been in national emergencies for quite a number of years. And it's clear to me that the president already can make whatever determination he thinks is in the best interest of our national security. My concerns are actually a little different. I don't want to create a huge bureaucracy that takes a couple of years to get up and going and say we've done all we need to do on Homeland Security. I was in favor of an independent commission to investigate our intelligence failures and other issues that need to be addressed by our government. I'm also in favor of making sure that we get the dollars that our homeland defenders need at home. I supported all of the requests very gladly for our military and feel that they're doing a tremendous job. But I don't think we've taken care of our firefighters and our police officers and other emergency workers who in effect are now our frontline soldiers.
Senator, we're going to let you get out of the wind in just a moment.
Well, it's, you know, I heard what you said, Tom, about the wind coming up, and I think a lot of us felt that perhaps there were spirits moving in that wind, and a lot of the families I watched as they bent over and picked up some of that dust.
Senator, during the 8 years of your husband's presidency, there were a series of escalating terrorist events around the world. After the '93 bombing at the World Trade Center, we lost the coal, or it was greatly damaged in Yemen, the two embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. Do you now look back and think that your your husband's administration, and for that matter, the congressional leadership on the other side of the aisle, the Republicans, simply were not aggressive enough about going after terrorism?
You know, I think, Tom, that certainly based on my knowledge, people did everything they thought they could do. I mean, they fly off of here in a minute, but they certainly believed that they were taking all steps necessary, including launching military attacks, looking for ways to roll up terrorist cells, which they did, arresting and trying people for the attacks, including the '93 bombing. But I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that what happened here behind me on September 11th changed everything. It changed a lot of Americans' attitudes about what we were willing to put up with. Can you imagine that we would have gladly stood in line and had our shoes taken off and been searched to get on an airplane without this kind of terrible terrorist attack occurring? So I think that, you know, hindsight is always 20/20, but certainly people were acting. They were very concerned. They made this a top priority. Some accomplishments could be looked at, but, you know, now we're living in a very different, changed world, and obviously we have to do even more.
Thank you very much, Senator Hillary Clinton of New York, at Ground Zero today. Back here at Studio 8H in New York, Julia Sweeney. There you are. You lost a husband.
Correct.
On United Flight 175.
Correct.
Before that plane was hijacked that day, did you think much about terrorism in America?
I didn't think much about it. My husband was a veteran of Desert Storm, so we would talk about it if we caught it on the news, but it was never a conversation that we spent a lot of time on, no.
You heard from your husband from the airplane.
I did.
Tell us about that message.
He called me at approximately 8:58, and that plane crashed at 9:03. And he was very savvy in airplanes and his flight pattern and how planes flew. And he called me at 8:58, which is the absolute second that I think that he went from 99.9% pretty sure he was on a doomed flight to 100%. So he picked up the phone and he called me and he left a message, and he said that he was on an airplane that had been hijacked, and if things didn't go well and it wasn't looking good, that he wanted to tell me that he absolutely loved me. He wanted me to do good, go have good times, relay that message to his family and friends. And he said he loved me again, and then he said, "I'll see you when you get here." And he hung up the phone and he said, "Bye, babe." And he hung up the phone. So it's become a very peaceful message to me. I have it. I'm glad I didn't answer the phone. And I think I consider myself one of the lucky ones in this incident, because I do know exactly what his mindset was just a few minutes before he died. And I knew where he was, and I knew how he died. And I'm very thankful for that. And that's exactly why he did that. He was very selfless in that. And then after he called me, he still found time to call his mother and spoke with her. So.
But you're angry at United Airlines.
I am. I'm angry at United Airlines, and I'm angry at the security companies. I think my anger actually got even more so after the fact, after a few months of witnessing things in airports that I think are unacceptable. I think that the randomness of the things that they're doing, it literally disgusts me. And I am shocked in a country with the wealth and the intelligence and the technology that we have and the things that we're capable of doing, that we didn't do something prior, and that we're certainly not doing something now. And I think that the reason why I'm pursuing what I'm pursuing is because if everything is laid out on the table and we know exactly what happened within the airports and the aviation system that day, and people are held accountable and they piece it together and the public knows, that's the only way it's going to change. Otherwise, it gets swept under the table. And I'm willing to, walk away from this with this battle, because it's what I can go to bed peacefully at night knowing that I'm hoping to change, that this never happens again. In airports, that's my battle. There's so many other little battles going on.
What did you think when some people did not want to spend the money? What did you think when some politicians did not want to spend the money to federalize the airport security system?
I actually didn't think much about that because when they finally did, and I think they did, I think it's a joke. All they did was they put a federal tag on their employees. Most of them haven't gone through new training. I think it's a joke.
Let me just have a quick show of hands if I can. Now, I understand that this is a special audience, but how many of you feel secure about flying now under the new system? Would you raise your hands? About 5 hands out of the studio audience. How many of you have given up flying altogether as a result of what happened? More people have done that. What about you, Julia? Do you fly?
Absolutely. I fly. I don't feel safe when I fly, but I also know I'm not going to stop my life because of it. And I also know that, as Brian said, told me even prior to his death, we had discussions about dying, and I'm still here and I still have a life to live. And I will continue to fly if I need to. I don't fly, on a daily basis or anything like that. But if I need to see family and friends, or if I want to go on a trip and enjoy my life, I'm going to do that. But I'm also an advocate in changing it, and I hope that I can. And I know that there's a lot of other people that are signing on from that battle. I'm very thankful for that.
Julia, Sweeney, thank you. Are you in touch with the other family members from United Flight 175? That was a kind of a special bond.
I've contacted a few. I met a few today, and it's actually a wonderful bond, and especially because I feel very blessed to be able to share that message with them, and that has helped a lot of them in finding some sort of peace in what the last few minutes of their loved ones' lives were.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
We'll be back with more from Studio 88H. America Remembers the Town Hall after this.
It's 11:45 in the morning, and there is a mass exodus from downtown New York City. It looks like a war zone. People are walking around stunned. As one officer said to me a moment ago, "Do you know what day it is?" I said, "September 11th." And he said, "That's right. It's 9/11.
NBC Tonight, Concert for America, presented by Boeing. Join Enrique Iglesias, Placido Domingo, Alan Jackson, Reba McEntire, Gloria Stefan, and President and Laura Bush. Concert for America, presented by Boeing, hosted by Tom Brokaw. Tonight, 9/8 Central on NBC.
NBC Tuesday.
22 years I've been married to you. I've been the happiest of my life.
The Cosby Show, a look back. NBC Tuesday at 8, 7 Central.
If only it were that easy.
It was the decade when anything was possible. The American dream was stronger than ever, and the music made everyone feel alive.
Thank you very much and welcome to American Bandstand.
I'm going on Bandstand.
You are not dancing on that show.
Ladies and gentlemen, here are the Beach Boys.
This is the story of a girl.
From NBC News, America Remembers. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
We're back at Studio 8H at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. America remembers and America learns from this experience. We have a family gathering here representing a great cross-section of the American family, people who lost loved ones, people who have been fighting in the war on terrorism, people who are trying to work out the compensation for the victims, and we'll be spending the next couple of hours in this studio so that we can come together on this first anniversary and learn from each other, grieve as well, and go on from here. Iliana McGinnis, you heard from your husband that day. He was at the World Trade Center. Yes, I did. Tell us about that.
Thomas called me. He was in a meeting on the 92nd floor, and I knew that he was in a meeting that day. He actually worked on the Mercantile Exchange, which is just a couple of blocks away. But that day, there was a meeting at 8 a.m. with all the floor brokers that belonged to his company. And the meeting was supposed to end at 8:30, so When I heard the news, I didn't go into immediate panic because I thought, well, you know, maybe he's out or on his way or going across that bridge. And of course, all the phones were down, and I kept trying. Everyone I know kept trying. But he did manage to get through to me on his cell phone. And the first thing he said was, "This looks really, really bad. This doesn't look good." And my first thought was, well, I've got him on the phone, so he must be okay. He must be talking about, you know, for the country, for the world. Yeah, this is World War III, I thought. And he just said it like 3 times repeatedly, and I knew, okay, something's not right. And I said, "Are you okay? Just answer me yes or no." And that's when he said, we're in a room on the 92nd floor that we can't get out of. And my feeling even then was still, okay, don't panic. You guys are so resourceful. You're so smart. You guys just don't lose your cool. And I kept saying that, don't lose your cool, just, you know. And he was very calm, but there was something very serious about his voice. And that's when he just said, "Iliana, you don't understand. There are people jumping from the floors above us." And that for me was just, I mean, I couldn't even imagine anything like that because I was sitting in my office. I didn't know about that. I could see the building from my office because I'm on 21st and 5th, but I had no idea that it was something that serious. I mean, you could see the building, you saw the big gaping hole, and you knew, okay, this is bad, this is very bad. But I had no idea until he said those words, and just the thought of those guys in that room, you know, but again, they seemed very tough. I could hear guys in the background saying, "Let's just knock down this goddamn wall." I could hear a woman crying and some other woman talking to her, you know, and he said, "I love you, take care of Caitlin," who's our little girl. And, you know, he says, "If we get out of here, it'll be a miracle." And I just said, "You're coming home tonight. Just don't hang up, don't hang up." And the phone line went dead, you know, because he was on a cell phone. Right. And so I didn't think, okay, the building's collapsed or anything like that. I just thought, okay, the phone line went dead. So, of course, I tried calling him back, and I could not get through, of course.
And sadly, there was no miracle.
No, there was no miracle.
He did not come home that night.
No.
But 4-year-old Caitlin was at home that night. And that has been a terrible trial for you in many ways.
It's been pretty intense. I mean, the questions that a 4-year-old asks, you know, the first couple of days, you know, the very first day she said, "Well, where's Daddy?" And I said, "You know, we'll talk about that later." Because at that point, I didn't know what to say to her. You know, I had no idea that it had been 3 minutes from the time I lost the connection to the time the building collapsed. I didn't know that until a month later when I got the cell phone bill. No one in my office told me it's only been 3 minutes. Somebody went to the ladies' room to get me a glass of water, came back, and the building had collapsed. But nobody could say anything. And it wasn't until that cell phone bill that I knew how much time had lapsed. So what could I say to her? I just waited a couple of days, and, you know, and then I started prepping her. And she understood at first, and she says, "Okay, so Daddy died." You know, and a few days later she goes, "Okay, he died, but when is he coming home?" Mm-hmm. You know, and then you have to try to explain that dying means forever. And what does that mean to a 4-year-old? They don't know what forever means yet. You know, and now she does. And, I mean, I've had my moments with her. Bedtime has always been the hardest, but she's a trooper. She is such a trooper, and I know he is so, so proud of us, of everyone, I mean, of all of us. You know, these guys and women that went through, you know, I don't know what happens after life, but if they're watching us, I know they're proud of what we've done here together.
And what about Caitlin's future?
You know, I talk about Daddy all the time, and we share pictures, and, you know, even she remembers things that I know have nothing to do with a picture, because people ask me, is she going to remember her dad? She's only 4. But you know what? I think she will, because she tells me about things that I didn't remember. She says, you know, this is how Daddy used to toss the salad. And she shows me, and I'm thinking, my God, that is exactly how he did it. You know, she lays on the couch, and she puts her hands behind her head, she clasps them, and crosses her legs, and she goes, this is how Daddy would lay on the couch with his sunflower seeds. And I'm like, oh my God, that is true. That's exactly it. So yes, I do think that she'll be okay. I just, you know, it's part of my job is to make sure that she's going to be okay and to keep his spirit alive and take care of her.
How are you doing?
Not bad. I have my good days and bad days, but overall, I you know, people tell me, how are you doing this? And I say, you know, I don't know. You just find a strength that you had no idea you had, and you do it. And I don't know where it comes from, but it's there, and I'm happy that I have that strength and that I got to talk to him that day.
Well, I think you've conveyed a lot of strength here today, and we're all grateful for that.
Thank you.
Charles Wolf is over here. Your wife worked at Marsh & McLennan.
That's right.
And you lost her that day.
Yes, she was on the 97th floor of Tower 1, the North Tower, and by the way, I figured it out where her desk was. The right wing of the aircraft came right through her office, the first aircraft, so she was vaporized instantaneously.
A lot of your life since then has been directed at the compensation arrangements that Congress passed. You've started something called Fix the Fund. You're not at all happy with what arrangements have been made.
Exactly. I came to the game late. Fixthefund.org is our website. And I decided in late July to pick up this fight when I found out that it wasn't being fought. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the Victim Compensation Fund is and what it isn't. But the more important part is it has severe inequities in it. Inequities which are causing many victims to, many victims' families to not get a fair shake.
In what way?
Well, first of all, I think it's helpful to understand the Victim Compensation Fund is part of the airline bailout package. And this is directly from the words of my congressman. This was presented to Congress as an alternative to litigation. Basically, they had to protect American and United Airlines from an onslaught of lawsuits that would not just have driven them into Chapter 11, but would have driven them out of business. And in order to restore the rights that they then had taken away from us, they created the Victim Compensation Fund to give us what we would have gotten out of a successful court settlement. And that's the first thing. That's what it was for.
But you're not denied the opportunity to, in fact, take legal action against the airlines.
We are, in effect, we are. But because the liability of the airlines has been limited to the amount of insurance they have, and the property owners have priority over us, in effect, we have no place to go. So, and they knew that, and so they set the Victim Compensation Fund up to give us as an alternative to litigation, which there wouldn't have been any value in anyway. And there are severe inequities in that. For example, if a victim in the World Trade Center bought life insurance, the proceeds from that life insurance are subtracted from the award that's computed for the victim's family. The same thing with a pension. The pension is subtracted from the award. The same thing if you're a widow or a widower with children. You will get less money from the Victim Compensation Fund because of the children than if you didn't have children.
We have somebody here that you know well. You're smiling and nodding at each other. I think everybody in this room knows him. He has, at the moment, the toughest job in America. He represents his own kind of walking ground zero, if you will. This is Kenneth Feinberg, who is the special master appointed by Congress to administer that fund. Let's begin with some of the issues that Mr. Wolf has raised here today.
Well, the first response is, of course, Mr. Wolf's right in one sense. Congress passed this law. I'm administering a law enacted by Congress. When I receive family complaints that life insurance must be set off or deducted, he's absolutely right. Congress said, I must deduct life insurance. And the reason is, I think, that Congress decided that that the real purpose, or one purpose of this law, was to make sure that at the end of the day, no family would be found to be destitute as a result of September 11. That the taxpayer, that the American people would step up, and at the end of the day, after all of the computations and after all of the offsets, if a family still was in need, that the taxpayers would provide some compensation. It's an unprecedented program, and that this was the goal, I think, of what Congress had in mind.
But it's fair to say that these families, many of them, most of them, in fact, are extremely skeptical about the fairness of the arrangement, the equity, that you've had, what, 695 claims so far out of the more than 3,000 families that are involved. We're a long way from getting this resolved.
Oh, I think that's right, but I have just two responses to that, Tom. First, there are only 11 lawsuits. That tells me that most families that I've spoken to, like the families in this room, are in grief and have not yet decided whether or when to fill out the application. I've gone to countless families and explained to the families how the program works. Their response has been generally, thank you, Mr. Feinberg. We appreciate your coming. Leave the application on the desk. We are not ready to start computing numbers and putting numbers on the lives of lost loved ones.
You said at one point, in some respects, this is one of the easiest cases I've ever done. The facts are not in dispute, but obviously there's a huge emotional factor. Your personal style has come into play. I think you've even had some second thoughts about it. Is that fair to say?
I've had no second thoughts about doing this job.
No, but about how you initially presented yourself and the case in group meetings.
I can tell you that I did not fully appreciate at the outset the depth of the emotion, the anger, the disappointment, the frustration of the families. And it wasn't until I went around the nation and met collectively with the families and individually with the families that you begin to fully appreciate what they're going through. They have been the single source of the best constructive input I've had into this program.
Okay, Nick Chiarchiaro, where are you?
Here.
Right here. Do you have something you'd like to say to Mr. Feinberg?
Well, we had a very nice conversation in the meeting room prior to here, but at our first meeting, I had quite a bit to say to him. I probably was going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was going to tell him that he probably had the most difficult job in the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as the meeting continued on and his responses to the various people in the room just seemed to bring out the Sicilian blood in me. It started to boil just a little bit. And I took my very nice questions, I kind of put them to the side, and I was going to not ask anything. And I finally got up and I said, I can't take it any longer. Body language is very important. Dealing with people in a room who have lost their children, their spouses, with responsibilities forever and ever and ever. One of his responses was to the young lady sitting next to me about how she's going to take care of her two boys. They're 3 years old, who, with all of these collateral resources being deducted and so on. And I just, again, raised my voice to assent. And I just asked that he look at things in a more open manner. The idea of collateral compensation kind of just drives me absolutely up the wall. And I have none. My wife earned a very small amount of money. I'm not anywhere in the category of most of these people, but I'm looking at the responsibility of the government. The government said we're going to do it. If you're going to do it right. You turned around and we killed some Japanese people by accident with a submarine. We gave them $3.5 million with no collateral or deductions whatsoever. Why not the American people? Why not just set a flat number to everyone else and just set it free? Why all the calculations? Why does someone have to sit down for hours, hire an attorney who wants 30% of this and 50% of that? Set up a flat number, whatever it might be, $1 million, $1.5 million. It'll probably cost the government a whole lot less, no collateral deductions, and I'll bet you everyone signs in.
What about that? What about the possibility of Congress going back and saying, you know, maybe we better retune this?
There's always a possibility. I can't speak for Congress. I can only, as I've told the families, I can only administer the law that is before me, and I'm obligated under the law to interpret it that way.
That isn't being done right now. Excuse me, I'm sorry, but there's a second part of this, okay? And that is the way that the law is being interpreted. When you compute the award, there's an economic side and there's a non-economic side. The economic losses are how much would that person have earned over the rest of their life, okay? And in that way, the person set the own value of his life at the job that he or she had. The
But that's a standard that has been used.
Right, absolutely. We're going
well
in
beyond
precedent.
this kind of, right.
Absolutely. We're going in precedent here. The non-economic losses are is the section that Mr. Feinberg has not taken what Congress put in there. Mr. Feinberg, for whatever reasons, has chosen to use a figure that is about 1/10 of what would have been in court. Congress enumerated about 8 to 10 different parameters to use when computing the non-economic losses. And Mr. Feinberg has chosen, or he was told to do so, to set this at $250,000 for the victim, $100,000 for a spouse, and $100,000 for each child. But there's an ulterior motive at work here. And this is what I want people to understand. The ulterior motive is they want to affect the course of future lawsuits. If there's a product liability case 2 years down the line, someone's been injured, he wants $2 million in pain and suffering, that defense attorney will get up in front of that jury and say, $2 million? Gee, The victims of the families of September 11th only got $250,000. Surely this man didn't suffer as much as those poor people in the towers. Why should he get any more?
Right.
This is tort reform in disguise. They shouldn't be doing it through the back door, and they should not be doing it on our backs, period.
Tort reform is a very big issue with a lot of members of Congress who were active in passing this bill.
Tort reform, as far as I know, I mean, I understand what this gentleman is saying. Tort reform doesn't lie at the basis of these numbers.
How did you arrive at the $250,000 and 100?
I arrived at the $250,000, 100 because existing federal statutes in other areas
15-year-old statute
have a $250,000 limit. If a fireman or a policeman or a uniformed officer is killed in the line of duty today in this country, he gets $250,000 award from the federal government.
That's a 15-year-old law. That's a 15-year-old law. And 90% of the people that died in those towers were not in uniform. I spoke to you. Mr. Feinberg, when you and I spoke at the British Embassy, I said right then and there, sir, with all due respect for everything else you're trying to do, you have chosen the wrong benchmark, period.
If an individual feels that $250,000 for the death of a loved one and $100,000 for each spouse and surviving dependent child is not enough, they have every right to litigate this case. I agree with you.
There's no money left to litigate.
Ma'am, you may say it's an insult.
Yes.
My answer to you is that what Congress did here has never been done before. There are that may be. That may be, but understand that there are people, I receive letters every day from people saying, why not me? My husband saved 3 children in a flood before he died. Why aren't I eligible for this fund? My husband was killed in a car accident. Why aren't I eligible?
This fund was Congress's low-cost option, that's why.
Well, let me just add.
I can only administer the program in front of me. That's all I can do.
This was Congress's low-cost option.
Mr. Wolf.
Sorry.
Your anger and your frustration is understandable, but is it best directed at Mr. Feinberg or Congress?
We are taking the matter back to Congress. Fixthefund.org is where you can go get more information. We are taking the matter back to Congress, and the people in Congress that don't want this bill to pass because they don't want to help New York anymore, well, just remember this, that most of those victims did not live in New York City. They live in the suburbs. And guess which way they vote?
Let me ask you about what you think. I mean, we know from Nick over here that there ought to be a flat fee of some kind. Is that a consensus here, that there ought to be some kind of a check written right off the bat? You don't think that?
No, because let's take the bond trader that was earning $250,000 versus the dishwasher.
Yeah, the window washer.
Okay, the window washer, okay? Those people that were earning the higher salaries obligated their family with much higher responsibilities in terms of mortgages, okay? We are not valuing human life here in this situation. They value their own human life in the job they kept. The non-economic losses, by the way, is the only way to get any money into the hands of the lower income people, because their lost salary for the rest of their life probably approximates what it would cost them to live.
I'm not sure anybody will be bold enough to speak up in this room if, in fact, they agree with the formulation that has been worked out by Mr. Feinberg. Is there anyone here who has applied and said, no, that's fine by me, I'm willing to do that? No one in the room?
I wonder why no one really wants to get into this fund.
People know what's fair.
I mean, it's really totally unfair. And all due respect to that bond trader who's making $500,000 a year, as opposed to that dishwasher who is working up at Windows on the World. We are putting a value on a life. We are saying that bond trader is worth more money than a dishwasher. Well, that's incorrect. Again, I'll go back to those Japanese citizens who were killed. I don't know what they did for a living. Probably nothing. They were probably fishermen. However, our government gave them $3.5 million, tax-free, no questions asked. We're sorry. Oops, our submarine killed your spouse. Well, guess what? My wife was killed. My niece was killed. Our spouses and families were killed. Is my wife worth less than the bond trader? Well, not to me. I was married for 37 years. She's worth $1 gazillion. And to put the words of my granddaughters in the mouth, it's yucky without Grandma.
Sally, you feel pretty strongly about all this. I'll hold it. It's okay.
Sorry. You don't trust me. You know, I feel strongly on a lot of issues, and I didn't intend to speak about this issue today, but I do want to say, Mr. Feinberg, what I object to most in this issue is that not only did the airlines get a free ride, but the limitation of liability wasn't just the airlines. We shouldn't call this the airline bill. The limitation of liability was given to Larry Silverstein, who was the person who was responsible for those buildings. It was given to the Port Authority, the people who are responsible for building those death traps. It was given to the city of New York. And the chutzpah, the ultimate chutzpah, it was given to the security company at Logan Airport that allowed those demonic cave-dwelling barbarians to take those planes and to kill all our loved ones. How, in the name of God, do you justify that?
Mr. Feinberg speaks very well for himself. I don't have to do it for him, but in fact, he was not the one who limited the liability of those various entities that you talked about.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be harsh with you.
He's here.
But,
he's
you know,
handy.
all right. But you're here, and you started talking about it. This is a disgrace. No one should call this the airline bailout bill. This is the Buddy Boy system bailout bill. Everybody was protected except our loved ones. Who was protecting my son? Everybody's butt was covered. And this is an American disgrace, and that's why this bill should be thrown out. And no one, I want to know on what basis does the Port Authority, the City of New York, Larry Silverstein, Logan Airport Security, on what basis do they get limitation of liability? I want to know that.
Do you have an answer?
I have no answer. I have no answer as to why Congress did what it did. I don't speak for Congress. I will just say this before I reluctantly depart. I would just say this. I very much appreciate and will continue to appreciate the opportunity to meet with you families and others like you. It's very important for me. If any family wants to meet with me, or if I don't have time, or I have so many families to meet with others, to talk about their individual application, how they should go about doing this, when they should do it, whether they need a lawyer, how soon they can get compensation, I will be glad to meet with you and try and get the best I can under the law. I cannot change the law, but I will work with you as I have for the last 9 months to try at least to do the best I can to try and help in some small way. I mean, one thing I've learned about this program, it is not a substitute for what you've gone through. I cannot begin, after 9 months on the job, to feel what you've gone through. I can't. I can only do what I can do, and I will be glad to meet with individuals to try and help. That's the best I can do.
Mr. Feinberg, just one quick second.
Go more than a quick second.
Sherry Sparaccio.
Right.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I know that a lot of the anger gets directed towards you, and you're the person up here. Frankly, as you said before, I don't know if it's you or if you're being told to do, because we do have an attorney general who might be...
Let me respond. Just let me interrupt for 1 second, because I do want everybody to understand. The idea that the Attorney General of the United States is trying to limit the amount of money that can go to families or change the rules, I will tell each of you, is absolutely false. The Attorney General of the United States, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the administration from the President on down have been very, very supportive and helpful in my trying to administer Congress's law. Do not for a minute suggest that the Attorney General is behind some effort to undercut the value of these claims. It's not true.
If you would like to put it all on your shoulders, I guess that's okay. I was kind of giving you an out.
Your anger can be directed at Congress. Don't direct it at the Attorney General.
Except, the only thing that Congress did say in terms of collateral offsets was life insurance, as unfair as we think that might be. They did not say Social Security. And there have been changes because workman's compensation was initially being deducted as well. Social Security is still being deducted for children, but not for spouses, but that's only because you can't, at this point, calculate life of spouse, but that was initially also being deducted. The other thing that could be changed, that might be in your power to change, would be the amount for the pain and the suffering. And you refuse to budge on that. So there is something that you can do. The other thing I would like to say...
Yep, about 30 seconds.
Okay, the other thing I would like to say is that you're asking Americans, Congress has asked Americans to sign into a bill, to sign into a package that we have no idea what we're going to get in the long run. And I do have 2 boys to raise, and I have a house, and et cetera. And it's difficult to sign into something when you just don't know what you're coming up with at the end. And I think that's totally unfair because you cannot plan your life around something that you can't.
I agree with that. I would urge you to sit down with me and we'll go over your individual
This is going to continue here. We'll be back in a moment with more of America Remembers.
So, a 9/11 widow, she gave birth just after the tragedy.
I'm going to tell you all about that.
A remarkable portrait of strength and charity. A special 1-hour edition of NBC Nightly News tonight.
NBC Tonight, 9/11. The President's Team Remembers. A special look back. Tonight, 7:30, 6:30 Central on NBC.